Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Design Advisory Panel meeting for November 12th, 2020. We have an agenda. We have one presentation this evening, and first on the agenda is calling the meeting to order, which I'm currently doing. Just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. It's the new normal, I guess. Second item is the adoption of the agenda. I'm assuming everybody on the panel has a copy of the agenda, and if there's no changes or alterations to the agenda, let's call for a motion to adopt. And secondary, okay.
Other than I don't believe there's any minutes to adopt, is there?
No, it's on the agenda, but there are none, so we're just going to skip over that one. Okay, all in favor of adopting the minutes, the agenda? Item 3, adoption of minutes. We don't have minutes from the last meeting, so we'll skip that one to the next meeting. And item 4 is our presentation. And tonight we have a development permit application for 2103 Bowen Road. And Caleb, are you going to introduce? Yeah, Caleb's going to give us an introduction.
Great. Thank you. Yes, as mentioned, this application, development permit 1137, is for 2103 Bowen Road. The application is for a 39-unit affordable rental housing project. The subject property is currently zoned Core 1, which is residential corridor. The relevant design guidelines here are the General Development Permit Area Design Guidelines. In addition, this was not noted in the staff design comment, but there are as well residential development design guidelines for this stretch of Bowen Road found within the official community plan, and if anyone does have that, you can find those guidelines on page 155. And the only other thing I would note here is that there is a parking variance request to go from 46 to 16 parking stalls and to increase the small car parking percentage. So with that, I would invite the applicant to begin the presentation, and they are welcome to share their screen at this time.
Cool. So I'm Kurt Mattel with LF Dawn. And we've got CJ, who's presenting his screen with HCMA. So I'll introduce the project here. The project's being brought forward by Untitled Chapter, the property owner, and LF Dawn, the design builder. We partnered to deliver the affordable housing project in the city of Nanaimo. This affordable housing project is currently being considered for BC's housing shovel-ready funding model. The requirement under the funding models of the project is to have the DP submitted prior to the submission of the proposal, so that brings us to where we currently are in the project. A little bit about the building itself. Off Bowen Road is 3 stories high. It will target set code 3. We've got 39 units of affordable housing. 30% of the units are 2 bedrooms, 70% are 1 bedroom. There's also a mix of accessible units included in the building. The proposed building will target seniors, singles, persons with disabilities, and families. The building is situated within a main transit corridor. Some of the amenities include daycare, retail stores, transit stops, community services, and parks. So we've engaged HCMA as the principal designer for the building, and I'm going to hand the rest of the presentation over to CJ with HCMA.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everybody on the panel. I think that after 9 months of this approach of Zoom, I would be more used to it, but it feels a little strange talking into the nothingness. And I'm sure that you're all sitting in your various places. I see some familiar faces actually on this panel, so I'm welcome to see that. Chris mentioned that we were engaged to help design this affordable housing project in the 9-mile Bowen Road. This actually occurred several years ago, so this project has been quite a while in the making and has undergone some changes over time as the project attempted to adjust to market realities and budget constraints. So what you see here is in the context of a very, very tightly calculated project that is really struggling to meet its to be born and make it to the next step. So we're hopeful that obtaining development permit at this stage would allow it to go forward to actually seek their funding. We do think it would be really fantastic project for the Niagara at this location. So talked about the Bowen Road Meredith Road intersection. It's an interesting situation in that there's certain anomalies in how Meredith Road winds around our site. So we have a very prominent corner position on our site. We are further challenged by the fact that it slopes more than 4 meters from one side to the other. So we have a 3-story building on Bowen Road. It does slope down, and we have a 4-story building presenting itself to Meredith Road. On the bottom of the image you see right now is the site on the right where there's 2 trees and it's currently undeveloped. There's nothing on this site. Further context images, the top one is the view across the street, mix of single family, multi-family, townhouses, apartment buildings, commercial projects, and then our site on the lowest image, number 4, again, currently vacant. Site plan, just see if I can. Whoa, sorry. So, I don't know if you can see on the screen, I decided to do. So up here, this is the highest point of our site, and as I mentioned, it slopes down significantly across the site, over 4 meters. When we were trying to approach the buildings originally, that's why I was talking about the fact that it's undergone several iterations. One of the original ideas was to have parking built into the site from the lower end and build over parking. Cost has shown that is not possible, and so instead we are filling a large part of the site and people have built 3 stories on the northern half of the site and then 4 stories only in a very small part on Meredith. From the south entry into the parking is awesome. The laneway off Meredith Road, we're providing the parking and garbage enclosure. And so on Meredith Road, we have the amenity spaces at the lower level. The next drawing that shows that. So you can see here on the lower level along Meredith Road is the amenity space, the operator's office, and utility functions, bicycle parking, and we still have 4 parking underneath the building. The remainder is surface parking out in our small courtyard on the south side of the building. As the property winds itself up along Bowen Road, we hit the ground level grade roughly 1/3 up Bowen Road, so that's the level, that's where our entry comes in. That has the advantage of putting our entry and our elevator more central into the building, so when you come in, that you can go either way, but it's not one long corridor that's split into it with a little bit of an amenity space and some communal space at the elevator core there. We try hard to make the laundry room a little bit of a shared space that's all central in this location. And then just regular floor plan with the central corridor and units up each side. Talk a little bit about the material palette. So as I mentioned, we're working with fairly cost-efficient materials with fiber cement. It was important to us to still attempt hard to break the massing down and to articulate the building as something that is both long and linear along the street, but has a vertical articulation listed into multiple units along Bowen Road. So you can see that we have these red volumes that lend themselves along the road on Bowen, and they also show up to the south that are proud of the white base of the main building, and we're expressing these with different panel types. So we're working with planks, we're working with boards, and then we also have some very vertical elements that show up in our window paneling, but also on our features there as well, facing the corner. We further focus important to mitigate between our building and the landscape. We introduced wood into the fencing where people get close to it for both privacy screens, for the other side of the canopy, and for fencing. Zooming out a little bit, we see here the building in its context. Again, the building along Bowen Road. Sorry, I was actually saying, yeah, it's 3 stories along Bowen Road. We expressed the ground floor as a slightly recessed floor in order to lighten the building up and let it sit a little bit above the grade, because as I mentioned, we're dealing with a slope and we really wanted to mitigate and not have it sink into the ground. So that's why we're letting these red elements float above the main level. So you can see here a view to the main entry, the canopy with the number showing there, and then to the left, large windows that are emphasizing the corner. This is the prominent corner facing both Meredith Road and Bowen Road. Coming around, again, zooming out, seeing the context. So this is the corner, the most prominent view. As I mentioned, we've gone through a number of considerations as to how do we address this corner, both from a landscaping perspective, because of the topographical changes, and also the stairwell that we have here. And in the end, we are currently showing the intention of working with various colored gradation of the vertical paneling to sort of create sort of a waterfall effect. Our real desire is to actually work with a public artist on this particular element, as well as for alternatively to work with a public artist on the corner landscape. You can see here, there's just 3 trees showing in this corner, but this again is where the crosswalk comes across, so this would be another location that we would like to go further if the project we do know that these trees in the foreground will become very large and to the scale of the actual building. To the left, the amenity space on the lowest level with its outdoor play area, a little bit of garden space, and landscape. We'll talk about a little bit more about the other features that we're offering there. Again, you can see the amenity space down below and the units up above. The white banding with the horizontal paneling, and then the red emphasize the actual panels, red panels. I will hand it over to Michael to talk about the landscape a little bit further, and then obviously welcome your questions when we come back to the end.
Thanks, CJ. My name is Michael Voorhees. I'm a landscape architect with Urban Systems. We've been engaged to develop the landscape for this project. The general landscape approach that we took was to create an interaction between the various frontages and the private patios so that there's still good visual connection with the streetscape and across also providing adequate levels of privacy. We selected vegetation for the mature height, seasonal interest, and drought tolerance, and we selected native species whether that was appropriate as a preference. We also selected tree species that would minimize any sort of impacts to overhead utilities and were appropriate to the scale of the building, and also provided both deciduous and coniferous tree species for seasonal interest. The next page. Along the Bowen Road frontage, this is where we use various deciduous and evergreen species to provide filtered views and seasonal interest between the sidewalk and the private patios. And we also end up using featured boulders and the bike racks to kind of emphasize the front entrance along Bowen Road. And the private patios are using concrete unit pavers to kind of create more of an intimate and private feel to the patios. Next slide. The east foundation plantings are sort of hiding the grade change up there and creating kind of a cascading effect of vegetation as it wraps around. The three trees selected on the end there are ginkgos, so they'll be quite tall and have a brilliant green when they emerge and have a great golden fall color. We've selected low maintenance ground cover plantings for the transition around this area as well. And the trees will provide winter sunlight, but summer shade, so that will help with the building environment. Next slide. And then the outdoor amenity space, providing some planters for community members to garden, picnic table for outdoor socializing. There's a wood play hut that has sort of a natural play element to it in the grass amenity space. And then we selected two different varieties of apple trees to provide further food gardening aspect, and also there were some apple trees in the neighborhood and on this site, so we'll go back up to that as well.
I think that's where we're ending our very short presentation. I was remiss in mentioning that it does mention in some of the guidelines that Bowen Road is intended to be street-oriented in its development. And one of our original ideas was to make the ground level units each with their own individual entry door along here, which is partly where the overall massing and composition came from. The operator advised that does not work for their model of housing, which is why we've then converted those down into private patios, which helps us with the grading from an accessibility perspective. But we did feel it was important to maintain that zoning along Bowen Road, and then that radiation from public to private that Michael's talked about with planting and screening and then so with that, unless Curtis has anything further to add, I'd be happy to answer your question.
I think I'm good, CJ. I think that was a very good presentation, so welcome for any of the questions.
Thank you for your presentation. CJ, if you could stop sharing your screen, that will help. I can actually see everybody again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, panel members, I will ask first, any questions for staff? Kate? Oh.
No, it's a question for the project.
Okay, hang on to that for 1 second.
Okay.
So no questions for staff? Okay. Then questions for the applicant. Kate, you jumped in, so I'm going to say go first.
I noticed that, I wondered if you could talk about the stormwater management briefly, because I thought I read somewhere that you were maybe going to be having bioswales, and I just wondered if that was true and where you have that on site. I think I read that in the, where you're telling us the point.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have a stormwater retention tank that's located underneath the asphalt parking area. That's on the Meredith Road side. And the swales, I think, are more in relation to landscaping swales. So
I think maybe Michael could talk more about that and how that gets kind of implemented. Yeah, I can talk about that. So the grading for this site ends up bringing water between Bowen Road and the private patios. And so that's going to be a vegetated swale that you native plants to help absorb the water that way, and then it ends up kind of wrapping around the corner as well. And throughout that, we're using vegetation as sort of an absorbent landscape.
Okay, that's what I figured. You didn't highlight it, so I just wanted to double check it was in there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Should I just carry on and make my comments?
Yes, you can carry on.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for your presentation. Excuse me, I'm not a landscape architect on the panel, so I will primarily speak to the landscape, but firstly, yeah, thank you for your presentation, and actually I like this building. I like some of the nuances that you've done with the form and just have some parts coming out and some staying in, and I appreciate too that you've decided to, the front patios, I think, I've worked with a number of BC housing projects, and I can understand the desire to not have the individual access points, so I get that, but I think you still have a good street presence on Bowen, which is important, and having your main entrance there. And I like that you've introduced the wood material but kept it very simple and still modern in the fencing to reflect the building design, so I think that's great. And what I wanted to comment on was the amenity space, given it's so small. And I just think there's not a lot of value in putting something like a play hut as the play element, and I actually think you'd get more value and more play by having more planter boxes, for example, and or contemplating just rocks and logs and just more open-ended kind of interventions, especially in a small space like that. Yeah, don't find, but that's for you to decide, but I would encourage you to explore that a little more. Also, when introducing gardening, you need to be conscientious of tools and tool storage and access to that space with dirt and mulch and all of that. So to make sure as you develop the space further that you're considering that. Also, I think it would be worthwhile to chat with the city. I would like to do this because I like putting more plants in occupying maybe a bit of that boulevard, especially the space by the amenity because it's a bit tighter. Maybe you can get a bit more plant material in there between the sidewalk and the amenity space, but that'll be a conversation with you and the city because they're going to be irrigating, and if you irrigate that, I don't think they'll have a problem. That's something to look at. I'm just going through my notes. I'm glad you're looking at introducing public art, and I think on your building is an excellent space for it. I think that's where we see a lot of the more successful public art in these development projects is when it's somehow integrated with the building versus at grade. And I hope you'll work with the city on that. I know the city is developing new sort of public art policy, and they have some great people working in the cultural department that it would be great to engage with them on that. Let me see. Oh, also, this is a tricky site that you're on that lane, and Meredith, because it kind of curves, if I'm coming from the lower end of Meredith up to Bowen Road, I'm looking right into the back of your building. And so I would encourage you to think about that a little bit more, because you're not really, your back is not quite a back. It's really seen from that perspective. I live in this neighborhood, so I kind of have a sense of that. And so maybe if you can add more planting back there where you have the garbage, or make it a little more robust, or I know you have one big tree there at the back, but just to pay more attention to that it's just not a back lane exactly, right? Not like normal back lanes. And then also I like, but yeah, overall, it's good, and I like that you included the ginkgo trees, and I know they eventually get to a very big size, but they're so slow growing. Just to bear that in mind on that corner, I don't think they will mitigate the height of your building as you ignite. So that's all. And I think that's all for now, and I will let the other panelists make a comment. So I guess I'm mostly just making comments and no recommendations at this point.
All right. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Very nice job, very difficult site, not only in the shape of the lot, but obviously the slope of the lot too. I don't really have any major concerns, just probably questions more than anything, but in the drawings it mentions future electric charging stations. What do you mean by future? Is that something that's not going to be done in the beginning, it's down the road? Just curious about that.
When we've been planning the project, it's just been a cost thing in mind, but it's not something that we have to do in the future. It's something that we can enable as part of the building. So I think it just got caught in that context. We've got two buildings that were very similar that we were working at the same time, so that's something we can definitely look at just installing right now.
Yeah, do you need them for the increased density, is that correct?
I believe we do.
Yeah.
But that issue came up, so it isn't meant to have them, and we're more happy to just pull them out of the gate. In future, when we just do it and have everything ready to set up. So more than happy just to set them up so that they're ready to go in the first instance.
Right, and the play hut, you need that for the increased density too, is that right?
I believe the play area was required for the increased density. Yeah, so then with that in mind, we're, open to, I think our landscape architect would be open to looking at different play elements, whether it be natural play element or, a play hut or anything to that degree.
Okay, and on the north elevation, I guess the north end of the building, did you look at possibilities of maybe moving in the kitchen areas, moving the sink to the outer wall so you can get windows put over top, put in place?
No, we can't. Unfortunately, BC housing guidelines prevent us from putting plumbing in exterior walls, so we can't undertake that.
Even if you put a double wall in or something like that?
We can't put a double wall in. We'd have to look at the impact of the overall floor plan. So one of the really big challenges we had with the site was the setbacks and fitting the building in and actually getting the density required to bring the funding model to a point where the hopefully be successful financially. So in really changing any of the interior around, it's going to be quite challenging and difficult for the project. Carl, is there something you'd like to add to that, PJ?
No, only that we acknowledge that I think that you're referring to the wall facing west, right?
Yeah.
That is our least favorite elevation. We do anticipate that over time, the development along that side will change to quite close to the property line, so we're talking that we can introduce a lot of vegetation. We did have, we were, this project really struggling the areas for each of the units completely on on area within the setbacks. You can see, if you look at the plan, I mean, you have that where, because of the curves, our setback on the corners, or like we're literally touching the setbacks on all sides, or on most sides. So having said that, we have been discussing, again, this building was designed over 2 years ago, and is only recently sort of resurfaced to our attention and moving forward for the city. And we have talked about things that we could introduce along that facade in particular to start to introduce the administration, where also maybe work with the actual staircase there and sort of add a little bit more liveliness to that particular side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but as Curtis pointed out, we have a lot of technical hurdles that need housing to overcome back and forth in things where so we weren't able to move things around to the building. There was also, I don't know, a little bit, but there was different operators at different times that had different ideas as to how exactly they would operate. So we've gone through iterations where every unit was universally accessible. We get versions where 50% were universal, and so there's a lot of history to these units, but I hear your point that I think we're happy to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Only other thing is really how the building relates to the corner, to the intersection, and it is a challenge because of the acute corner that you have there in the building. City staff, or the staff mentioned that too, that the building doesn't relate really that well to the corner. And I'm not sure what you can do with it, not as a matter of carrying that red feature element around onto the corner. Maybe just give some thought to that and see if there's a way that you can relate the building to the corner intersection a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, happy to discuss further. We spent a lot of time trying to sort out the logic of the massing of the building and trust that I still have the image in front of me, that's why I can look at it right now. The slender expression of the white background volume as it goes towards the corner for us to address the corner, and then the gray staircase element, which in an ideal world probably would be something like brick, but that's not in our scope of license. But I think so we try to do the massing articulation and then the large windows that are somewhat playful in how they orient themselves around that corner, sort of they just address the corner without trying to put a turret or anything too obvious right there at the corner. So, but yes, it was definitely one of the cruxes of the project was how do you resolve the building going around the corner. And to Kate's point, cognizant of the fact that it's not a front and a back, but sort of a multi-oriented building, is that Meredith has a slightly different angle to it, but it's still a frontage, and so that little part that has the amenity space and the somewhat unusual units above it, sort of wrapping around the corner and addressing that situation, the triangular nature of that corner. So, yeah, happy to discuss further or explore further, but that's where we came to it.
Sorry, Kevin, my phone dropped out and I missed the question that you asked. I was trying to dial back in.
Yeah, it was just how the building relates to the corner, to the intersection, and in respect to form and character, and if there's ways, solutions to make it relate better to the corner.
Okay, cool. I trust CJ covered that.
Yeah, and it is a challenge because once you get around the corner and onto Meredith, I think the form and character works very well, how it relates and works its way along Meredith to where it turns back in. So that part works good, especially if you're going to be doing public art on the facade as well. It's just right at the corner is where it seems to be a little bit weak, and whatever we can do to improve that would be a real help to the project. But aside from that and the northwest elevation. I think the form and character is great, and I like the landscape concept as well. And good luck, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. Steve?
There we go. Sorry, my mute button wasn't working for unmute. Thank you for the presentation. This has been a long time coming over the last couple of years. I do like the project, especially in the area, as I live close to Cape. I'm only a few blocks away from this area. Excuse me. It's in the right area for sure, being that I think it was Habitat for Humanity is right across the road on Bowen, and then there's a bunch of apartments that are just on Meredith as well, which is great. I did have just one small nitpick and take it with a grain of salt, but it's just the fencing on the corner of Bowen and Meredith, where it kind of rounds. Just in my past experiences, having that squared off, because it is a square building, everything is cornered on 90s. Maybe a little bit more not outstanding, but maybe it's just a pet peeve on my end. But apart from that, it's a great looking project for a crazy property, very challenging, and you guys have done a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Marie?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. First of all, I just want a clarification. I've been hearing affordable housing, BC housing. Now I feel I'm sort of missing something. Is this subsidized rental housing, or is that not the case? I'm not too sure. I've been on the fence. How do that?
Yeah, it's geared to income, so there's different subsidies that are applied, and that will be relevant to the operator when they decide on that. But so I can't remember off the top of my head, but it goes like 30% subsidy, 50% subsidy, and then deep subsidy, which I think is like 70% below market, and that will be determined by the operator and BC Housing. Correct? Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't sure. Is this like a condo project? Is this a rental?
No, so it is. Yeah, so it is 100% affordable housing. So at the end of the day, the society will actually own and operate the building. And they sign a housing agreement with BC Housing. I believe it's either 30 or 35 years. So they own and operate the building for that period of time. They get a subsidy from BC Housing for that period of time, and those rents will apply through that period.
Okay, thanks. No, that's a good explanation. And we've had other projects here by other developers, and they all call them affordable. So I'm not, I was trying to figure out, well, okay, what is this? Okay, that makes a little more sense, and especially when you're talking about cost restrictions and so on. That gives me a different perspective on it for sure. But anyway, I concur with all the comments so far. I think it's a great building. It looks good in that location. I think you've really provided a very thoughtful building on that spot, and I think it's a great addition. I like the idea that you're also going to consider some public art. I think the corner on the wall, like Kate mentioned, is a really good idea, as opposed to some standing sculpture. And I also encourage you to work with the city in terms of selection and that sort of thing. Yeah, my only concern here would probably be the parking variance, but I'm not sure how much we have to say there. We should probably all talk about that. I'm sure that'll come up here shortly, but other than that, I don't really have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Tony.
Thank you. I think it's a great looking project. I think you've done a really nice design job. Nice, crisp, clean, contemporary look in terms of the form and character, well integrated into the challenging slope of the site and the shape of the site. I don't think there are any more rectangular flat plates left on the island. At least that's been my experience. It just reinforces that. Particularly like the streetscape on the main frontage there. And I would maybe just echo Kate's comment where you go around the corner to the parking and the garbage enclosure. It's not quite as, it's not bad, it's not quite as successful as the other one. So just an observation there. That's all I have on form and character. I did have a gratuitous comment. I just can't help throwing in about it takes 2 years to get an affordable housing project to this stage, and it's going to be another 2 years before it's occupiable. I mean, no wonder there's such a lack of affordable housing in the environment. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Well, there is a sister project to this that is ready for construction. Curtis, right? That you tendered or?
Yeah, so we do have another project that, you're right, they're sister projects. They're fairly similar with the buildings, and it's out in Oliver. It's been tendered and it's currently just waiting on the final pick from BC Housing. And it's, we're forecasting a construction start in January sometime. So it unfortunately does take a little bit of time to get these going, but it's just the way it is.
Just the way it is. Tyler?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the presentation, everyone. I understand staff comments around the corner, and I actually like the entrance where it is, and just the way it sort of blends into the building, but I do feel that sentiment around the corner, and I think maybe some of Kate's comments or some of the comments around public art might go a long way to sort of addressing that. The other comment that I do think that Kate brought up there around the Meredith side, again, I think landscaping is probably the answer, but I think it deserves a little more attention to make that work just a little bit better, so it doesn't seem such a shock when you're coming up Meredith Hospital. Other than that, I think it's a great project, and I hope it gets selected, and be very excited to see it built on that corner. Major transit corridor, so I think the park experience really makes sense, and that's actually one of the places we'd be looking to do bus rapid transit in the next few years, so I think it makes a lot of sense. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Tyler. Okay, I seem to do this every week. I go last, and everybody's already said everything. I only want to add one comment. It was sort of raised, actually, initially by Kate. I, too, went through your checklist for the Tier 2 density, and there's a number of things in there that you're promising that I don't see. So I caution you to make sure you get those right, because you lose 2 points, and you lose a quarter of your density. Not a quarter, but 0.25 increase. So you're, for example, 30% green roof, and I don't see any green roof. So it's not really, it could be a form and character thing, but it's just something that I caution you to focus on or pay attention to as you go forward, because it could hurt if you don't catch it. And then my only other comment, I forget who raised it actually. It was about the fence, the curved fence. I think it was Steve. I also noticed that everything on this building is very rectilinear, super rectilinear. And then you have this one right on the main corner. You have this one piece that picks up the curve of the road. It's not on the building. It's just in a fence. I think you either have to carry that further, and that would address comments about how to address the corner, or lose the curb fence, because it's a bit of an anomaly. So with that, I think what we should do is call for a motion, and I heard a lot of good comments and good suggestions, but I didn't actually hear anybody saying they had a strong recommendation. Maybe Kevin, with your comments about the northwest elevation and the relationship to the street. I don't know if you wanted those to be recommendations.
Yeah, I think they should be, unless somebody has an objection to it. I think that should go in as recommendation.
Okay, then what I'd like to do is call for a motion that we can have a discussion about. Kate?
I wondered if we could just see that elevation again? Is that a possibility?
I don't know that we have it in the presentation.
So we didn't.
Rendered. I do have a slide that just shows the elevations as they were in the package that you received.
Oh, okay, it's okay. It's okay.
It's, if you have your package, Kate, it's basically the west elevation that has blank walls and no windows. Well, very few windows.
Yeah, the west elevation.
So that's the side of the building that faces the house there.
So it's sheet number A3.01, I believe.
It's okay. I have it on my computer, which is over there. It's okay. The north elevation was confusing me. I get it. Okay.
Okay, so, oh, here we go.
But just quickly show you, so the one we're talking about is the one that's called west elevation, and it is tight, very tight up against the neighboring property, and it is currently very windowless, and so I guess what we would want to understand what the recommendation would be as in the introduction. I like Kevin's idea about introducing actual windows into the units. We've tried that before and we were not successful. So maybe the recommendation can be in some form that acknowledges that we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about this elevation without being too specific in what exactly we need. I'll leave that to your discussion. Obviously, that's how you formulate that. But happy to hear comments or suggestions on that. We can happy to look at it.
Yeah, I would just say, just in the simplest way, as far as the recommendation would be to add character to the west elevation would probably be the easiest way.
Just a comment, but is it worth noting that there's a house beside us there? Like, you're not going to see that full elevation? It's obstructed? I'm just trying to understand, but...
Yeah, I think as you drive down Bowen Road, I think because of the height of it, you would notice that because the house there is pretty small. I think you would notice that until something happens down the road where a larger building would be put in its place, or whether it's on that lot or if a bunch of lots along there got consolidated. I think it wouldn't take much really to add character to it. It could be a change of materials. It doesn't have to be windows, but I think even though it's a small surface, I think there could be ways to improve that elevation.
Yeah, fair enough. I think we can look into that quite reasonably.
Is there an opportunity to maybe do a ivy wall or something along that line? That's more Kate's forte, but...
I think Michael is the correct. I think we talked about many of these things that cleaned up and that's the desire. We can't get too close to the building. We can do living walls. We can. I would be happy to be right on that, but that's likely no one because I know we talked about that particular elevation and the desire to have something growing up it, and that because it's quite tight, and so we thought, well, then go up rather than put trees there because we have more room for trees. But is that right, Michael?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's offsets that BC Housing requires in their guidelines about keeping trees and vegetation away from the building materials.
Makes sense.
Okay, Kevin, sorry, I'm writing and talking at the same time. For the corner relationship, Would you consider something similar, saying consider strengthening the relationship of the building to the intersect, to the Meredith Bowen intersection?
Basically, I am relating it to the form and character, but there could be ways to do it through landscape as well, to relate better. So I just think that if we put it in the words that the project relates to the corner, to the intersection of the corner, would probably be a better way of putting it. That way they can look at the form and character or landscape concept as well.
Okay. Sorry, writing, talking. So yeah, so I didn't have any other strong recommendations from other panel members, so if anybody wants to jump in, Kate?
I just wonder, this is actually if we also agree with the recommendation, does it matter? Just asking.
It doesn't matter, but...
Because I like the corner.
Well, so the thing is, what we should do is get the motion out with a couple of recommendations, and then we can discuss.
Okay, also, should we make a recommendation then about the backside where the garbage is and the landscape, that they should work on improving that, since a number of us mentioned it?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I say, I think that's technically the southeast elevation, south-ish.
Would it be more the southwest?
Sorry, yeah.
Are we talking about the southeast? I would argue is the amenity space at the outdoor play area, whereas I think we're talking about the parking lot itself and the garbage enclosure again, which does not really show up in many of the renderings because it's sort of a little bit outside and up the alleys. But yeah, I think we're hearing what we're talking about, and I believe staff have already commented on the desire to add some landscape to that garbage enclosure.
Right.
So we're yeah.
Okay, so I have three recommendations. Consider adding character to the west elevation. Consider strengthening the relationship between the project and the intersection. Open to building and or landscape interpretation. And consider further design and landscape improvements to the south elevation parking and garbage area. So with that, could I have someone put forward a motion, please?
I would make a motion to accept the project as presented with those three recommendations.
Okay, seconder? Tony, I got lots of seconders. Everybody's seconding. Okay. And
So if we want to open it for discussion, if Kate wants to jump in on the corner one, and anybody else to see whether or not that needs to be included as a recommendation, I'm open for that.
I only said something because I actually thought they did try to do something there with the way the windows, and I thought that was a little bit more interesting than what we normally see. And so, but that's the landscape architect. I'd like to know. I just thought it was more interesting than what we normally see.
Tyler?
Yeah, I actually like the corner as well, but I did think through the presentation, talk about public art, but then also talk about trees that grow up really tall. So I think there just needs to be a clear direction chosen, and science panel is always about trying to make some additive suggestions that may improve a project. So I think they probably understand that the intent here is really to take a look at that corner again and tweak it to as they see fit to maybe try to address some of the comments.
Okay. Any other comments? I can't see everybody. Oh, here we go. I would echo the same thing. I think I like what the building's doing, and I think maybe there could be a little more something happening at grade around that corner. So it's probably, it could be more of a landscaping approach than a building approach. And then the only other comment or question I wanted to raise was, do we want to chime in as a panel on the proposed parking variance, or do we have the option of commenting on that, or we can just kind of leave it alone?
I think we should leave it alone. I think if we supported it being so much of a variance, I think it might be something that I just don't feel it's right to support it, but I don't oppose it. So
it's not really a form of character thing. We can leave it off that way if we want to.
Yeah.
Well, it's currently not part of the recommendation, part of the motion, so we can just leave it as is.
Yeah, I've got concerns about it, but I don't know if it's our purview. This is something that has to go before council then to be decided. Is that what happened?
Yes. Tyler?
Yeah, so I mentioned this before, I don't know how it cannot be a form of character issue, because if the variance is not approved, the building probably doesn't work, right? So, I completely understand the scope of the town in terms of approval, but, even something like, I just don't understand, the variance of this degree is not like they can accommodate the building as is by putting the parking in a different configuration. So it seems to be very attached and pretty hard to support. But I don't think it is up to this panel to decide.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Can I chime in here?
Steve, yeah?
And just to the city, I guess, can we get some clarification on this, Caleb, in regards to the panel, and do we speak to this or do we not speak to it? Because this is coming up on a regular basis.
Yes.
Not an answer now.
Okay. Sure, we can get back to you then, yeah.
Okay, so any further discussion on the motion?
Well, I have to say, I sort of agree with Tyler that this is still a form of character issue, because the building is shaped around parking. Parking is just as much important as the living space in these situations. So I'm a little concerned that if we don't comment, it means agreement. And I have a bit of an issue with dropping the parking that much, because there's not even any street parking in that area. So where are the cars going to go? And maybe you could say this is low-income housing, people don't have cars, but I think that's a bit of a prejudice to think that they don't. And so I'm kind of concerned about what the precedent, how that sets the precedent. I have no problem giving parking variances for a number of cars, but not that many. You're talking about, there's going to be at least 30, probably at least 30 residents in there with cars in that building. There's not going to be any parking for them.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the challenges of getting into the weeds with parking variances, because it's very difficult without a traffic study, without a report. We go through this on pretty much all of our BC housing projects, and we try to find a number that makes sense for the housing or for the parking. Usually coming from the operators, because they're the most experienced with actually how many people have vehicles in the units that they currently manage. This one is slightly below what I would call the standard metric, which is around 0.6 or 0.65. And this one is below that, so they are pushing it a little bit, but in my experience, I would say they're pushing it, a few stalls, it looks like a huge variance against the parking bylaw, but in terms of affordable housing usage rates, it's not that far of a push. So,
You know, that's why it made a difference when I realized it was a BC housing project, but then, again, that sort of, it's a kind of a bias that we have. These people don't have cars, so that's fair too. And where are they going to put them? I'm particularly concerned on the street there. I don't think there's any parking in Bowen, and I don't think there was in Meredith around that corner either. So then you're going to have a spillover effect where people are parking in commercial lots or further down the street and so on. So anyway.
I actually can comment on Meredith because I drive my daughter to her dance studio twice a day, it seems like. There is parking along Meredith on the right side going, I guess that would be west. So there is some overflow, and I know it's quite empty there. Yeah, I wouldn't say that there isn't any street parking out in that area. Marie?
I don't think of any, but I didn't think there was a lot.
Yeah.
You don't have two sides, and Bowen is out of the question, so you've only got down one street, and so is that going to be packed with parking, with cars parked along thereafter?
I know with all the apartments that are there, they all have their own parking for the most part. There's a little bit of off-site parking, but not a whole heck of a lot, so I don't think that'll be too much of an issue in my eyes.
Yeah, but even if for every unit, you might have two people that each have a car, so I mean, even because it's sort of counted by unit, even those other places, we might have people already parking on the street.
Gotcha.
So, at the moment, we have a motion that doesn't speak to the variance. We could add some comment towards the variance if that's so desired. Or we could, again, the applicants heard our comments and one member of council. So we could leave it at that, or we could amend the motion to include some comment about the variance or the rationale for the variance or something like that. But at the moment, we don't have that on the motion. So does anybody want to amend the motion with respect to parking, or do we just leave it as is? Tony?
I'm clicking the mute one on my picture, so anyway. Again, I don't quite see the trying to form a character. I mean, we're presented with this as shown, and I think the parking variance is such a huge subject for just about every project these days, particularly one with affordable units. And I think if the operator of BC Housing and so forth, they've got guidelines for just about everything down to the doorknobs. And if they say they're way clear that making this project work from that point of view, then obviously that's a factor for council to ultimately consider. I presume that there have been parking studies, the Yang list of comparable projects, there's probably piles of them somewhere, traffic studies, and I really think it's way too big a subject for this town, but that's just my opinion. It's way too big for me, that's for sure.
Okay. I'm seeing no real desire to amend the motion, so I'm losing my voice, sorry. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Should we just get our farewell now?
We do have, sorry, there actually is one more item on our agenda, which I'm flipping madly to find. And I think it's just there for information, which is the proposed meeting schedule for next year. And I think it's just kind of a save the date thing for panel members.
Can I confirm too, is the next meeting our last one in 2 weeks? For the year, sorry.
Do we know that?
No,
We normally have one.
yeah, through the chair, I think there's one in December coming up as well. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but there is one in December, but just the one as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, so the next one would be the
So there's 2 more.
26th of November, assuming there's something on the agenda, and then likely the 10th of December.
You don't have anywhere to go, so okay.
COVID gets worse, we'll just stay in our room.
Okay, so the agenda says discussion around the key date calendar, but I guess nobody has any questions about that, and I think we're okay with that. So the last piece of business is adjourning the meeting, so motion to adjourn. Thank you, seconded, thank you, and all in favor, thank you. Have a good night.
You guys.
Good night.
Hey, everyone.
Goodbye.